Hi, guys, and welcome back to episode 4 of Teen Talks. I'm your co host, Sierra. My pronouns are she, her, and.
I'm your other co-host, Sanvi, and I use she, her pronouns as well.
And today we are back for our 4th episode of Teen Talks.
All right, so our topic is mental health, which is such an important topic, in my opinion, to talk about. And so just to get started, to start it going, how do you feel that the media portrays mental health? What is different ways, negatively, positively, that you think the media portrays mental health?
I guess I'll start. The way media has been portraying mental health is there's some positives, but there's a lot of negatives in my opinion. They make it seem as if people who struggle with mental illness, there's something wrong with them, especially within the Black community, there's something wrong with you. And then also I feel like there's a lot of romanticism of mental health, which gets on my nerves and makes it seem it's a trend to go through mental illness and stuff. When in reality, it's really not. If anything, it's so it gets in the way of your daily life so much to the point where it's frustrating. So
I agree with what Cydni said because I remember this, and I think this movie came out 2016, 2017. So I don't know if you guys have ever heard of the movie Split. And basically it's about the one guy, he has dissociative identity disorder. So then that movie was out for a little bit, and then I know there's this channel on YouTube called Dissociated, and they basically broke down what it was really like to have DID. And Split was a completely different misconception. The information wasn't accurately told. Even the actor who played the person with DID, he said, I didn't have a lot to work with, and they kind of just did what they had with what they had, and it wasn't the correct representation. So I think it's media just really doesn't show what it's really like. Sometimes there's always going to be that fantasy of it, and that's not the right way at all.
Someone in my class did a presentation about the representation of mental health in the media, and they talked about Bojack Horseman and how that was one of the most accurate representations of mental health that they've seen. And I think that what I like about Bojack Horseman, or something that I see that in, or different from 13 Reasons Why, for example, is that I don't know, I think it goes back to what Cydni was saying, the romanticization of it. They try to make it so important that this is what they're talking about. They're yes, we are going to tackle depression, we are going to talk about PTSD, and then they do it in the most dramatized way possible, instead of keeping it instead of taking care with how it's shown and taking care with what what they're implying with the representation, and with how how it represents in the characters and stuff.
And yeah, what I find interesting is that we have all of this quote unquote representation of mental health in the media, but then it's still taboo to talk about, and it's still hard to ask our friends are you okay? And it's hard for parents to ask their child, are you okay? And so that's what I find interesting, the whole, it just feels very, I want to say separated, we're separated from it, we're seeing it happen, but then we don't see it happen in the people around us or in ourselves, or we we don't pay attention to it, we don't recognize it as maybe I should take a break or something. And I think I've definitely what's it called, I think it's burnout. I've definitely tried to deal with that. So yeah.
I just have a question, Nia, really quick. What is the mental illness issue or mental health in BoJack Horseman?
Yeah, so I guess what I would say is that it doesn't specifically even say oh, this character is dealing with anxiety, this character is dealing with depression. It just kind of they're all kind of coded, or at least that's I watched it, but I'm not the most, how do you say, I don't have very, I guess, organized thoughts on it necessarily, but what my classmates said in their presentation was that it was like they were very coded towards mental illness, and they were going through similar patterns. And when I watch like video essays about it, they can connect it. This is how abuse works. This is how it can change your mindset. This is an example of how PTSD is shown in this character without that being. But in Bojack Horseman, it was just like that's just how the character was growing. It wasn't necessarily being like, oh, we're going to show you how you should deal with PTSD, how you should deal with this. It's just what the character is going through. So it's like the character is the main like priority, and the mental illness is just something about the character, not the entire like purpose of the show or purpose of the TV show.
That's such a good point, to kind of say how mental illness or mental health isn't just a person. That's not just what a person is. Because I feel like a lot of times when we look at people, we're like, okay, like, because we give people labels all the time. So we're like, okay, boy, girl, tall, short. And then I feel like once some people get stamped with like the fact that they have depression or anxiety, they're put into this outcast box. And then that's all they are. They're just depression, they're just anxiety, they're just PTSD, when they're just people that deal with things a little differently.
I feel like with like the media and just like social media, like as big as it is, it could affect like you a lot. Like for example, from my experience, like I have like a diagnosis, like I have mild depression, but it is what it is. But there are times where like you can get on there and then you can start like comparing yourself to people, and then it's just like this downward spiral from there. And then like you start to like have like all these thoughts about yourself, and it's like at the same time social media is very addicting, so it's kind of hard to pull yourself from out of like that rabbit hole, like, hey, like come on, like get off of here for a little bit. And it could also affect people who doesn't suffer from mental health, because people like can start comparing themselves, feeling insecure, and all this other type of stuff. So
I think what Cydni was talking about, kind of just like that spiraling down the rabbit hole. I feel like sometimes for me, I use social media as an escape from like whatever I'm feeling, but then while I'm on social media, it like perpetuates that feeling. So it kind of just like goes in sort of a circle that is hard to escape.
Yeah, I think that I also agree with that, like with like the spiral of like it kind of like, I don't know, like once you might go there to escape, but then once you're there, you kind of get like a little bit trapped. But also about like media and how it's like represented. I also think that like, I don't know, I think that characters that are written correctly can be a sense of comfort. I think some shows, if they're too realistic, it can be like triggering in a sense. But I think that's why like the representation, like proper representation of like characters with mental illness in TV shows or movies, media in general, is important, because I think that like the problem with some like TV shows is that it's like, it's not really written to be relatable to people who actually have it. It's maybe meant to educate or to make a point or like make a little bit of a political statement, instead of trying to just, write a relatable experience that maybe I can look at and I can, understand a little bit more about myself, or I can look at and just cry because I realize that's a similar situation that I was in like a month ago, So I think in that sense, it can be comforting when it's represented well.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, because there was some good representation. I'm not gonna lie. Like there were times where like I'd be watching a show and then they'd be representing a character who may like have like depression or anxiety. And like in a sense, like even like if it's to like a very small extent, I can somewhat connect with them, and it could like kind of trigger an emotion in me. So I definitely think there are some positive aspects into the media, like when you take the time to really like understand what it is and what it is not, and you find a good way to represent it, it could definitely like affect a person with who is suffering from a mental illness, and even other people who aren't suffering, to educate them, and also to be relatable and be like, you're not alone in this, you're not the only person going through this. Because when you like suffer from a mental illness, it's so easy to feel like you're alone and feel like you're the only person in the world going through something, and you feel crazy. But when you have like the media and like stuff like that positively represents it, it makes you feel less alone about what you're going through. It's like, okay, this is little bit more normal than what I think it was, you know.
Yeah, and I think even what Sierra was saying, like the kind of connection between how it's like how mental illness is shown in TV shows versus the way that you might feel about it, it's kind of like how when characters they're written with like their mental illness as their primary factor, it can make you even feel more isolated and feel more estranged because you can think, so that's all I am in this world. All I am is like a person with mental illness, and and I serve no other purpose to the plot, to the character, to the to the message behind this TV show. But when it's written the opposite way, when you're a person, then I think there's like that sort of relatability where you can see, okay, this character is still successful, they're still normal, and they also have mental illness, and it's just another part of them, just like it might just be a part of you. So I think that's, yeah.
Yeah, so mental illness is definitely represented a lot. And like everyone brought up, there's a lot of positivity in how people are representing, because people do feel alone, and there is a lot of negativity. And so, what are some mental health stereotypes that you see are most commonly shown in TV shows? Like for me personally, I've seen a couple of shows where the most common mental health issue that I felt was represented was depression, which is a really important mental health issue. But the way it was represented wasn't as ideal as it could have been. I think that it needed to be represented better, and it needed to show like what actually happens when you're depressed and what the actual mindset is. And it just showed more of a stereotypical mindset that I think anyone who would hear the word depression would think that, oh, they're just sad and never happy, when depression is that, but there's so much more to it as well.
I think one of the things that just comes off, it's just the fact of like you have this show and it's like it's good, and then they just put something in for diversity's sake, like the token black friend, like, oh, we just need, some racial equity, equality, so let's just throw them in there. We'll get a supporting character, but like, she's like Asian, and we don't really care about her. She's just there to be there. So I think that's also with like mental illness too, just slap, oh, this character has bulimia. That sucks for her. She has it, because that's one of the things in Heather's too, in the movie and in the musical. Heather Duke has bulimia, and then Heather Chandler's like, she's like, bulimia is so 1974. Bulimia is a real thing. Like, I understand for musical sake, but that's not the best way to explain bulimia, or to even be like, oh, well, it was just like a thing. It was a fad. Everyone was doing it. That's not what that is. These aren't fads. They don't end because a TV show ends, and they don't end because people decide they just want to stop being depressed. Like, you can't tell someone to stop being depressed when they can't stop their brain from just processing things or just thinking that way or getting into that like cocoon of just being not them, but that is them.
Yeah, I agree with you. And like one thing that I wanted to like piggyback on was what Sanvi said, like, the way, because a lot of TV shows, they represent depression a lot more than most mental illnesses,
Mm-hmm.
and they always are like, oh, it's just like, they're sad all the time, they cry a lot. And I'm like, well, yeah, but there's more to it, I guess, because sometimes it's a lot of apathy. Like you just feel empty in a sense, like, I guess like from my personal experience, like mine isn't as bad as other people's, but it's more than just being sad all the time. It's just trying to motivate yourself to just like get on with the day. Like some days it may be hard to get out of bed, and then you're just like, because for me, I try so hard to motivate myself, like, come on, like get up, like you gotta come on. But then like the more that like I stay up here, the worse that it gets, because my mind can turn into like my worst enemy in less than 5 seconds. And then now I'm just stuck and I don't know what to do with myself. So it's so hard to explain, like trying to put it into words, but it's so much more than just being sad all the time. It's just trying to like get on with the day while you feel like utter crap. So
Yeah, and I also think, I guess two things kind of piggybacking off of that is that I think that the like, especially like with depression, I think that the way that it's solved, it kind of shows, it's not just like, oh, a lazy sad person, their friends just need to reach out and support them, then they're happier and everything's better. I think that it, because in one movie, I forget what it's called. What's it called? There's it's an anime movie on Netflix. It's on Netflix. A Silent Voice, I think, is what it's called. The representation of depression in that movie is, I found it very good, because it showed how a person can be irritable and they can actually lash out on their friends and family. It's not always just like laziness, lounging around. You can you like it does come across as negative. It does negatively impact your relationships sometimes, and then also it kind of goes like where like the romanticizing comes in, and also this goes back to when we were talking about Split, but only the like, I guess the like easier to digest mental illnesses are kind of presented, or the easier to digest sides of that. Everyone can maybe understand being unmotivated, but not everyone understands maybe PTSD. Not everybody understands schizophrenia. Not everybody understands other disorders that aren't really represented at all in the media. People with schizophrenia are almost always shown in like a violent light. It's never really shown in a very like positive, normal, everyday aspect, even though it's something that people are dealing with. And the negative sides of anxiety, of OCD, of depression are also not shown in like a normal everyday light. They're seen in horror movies, which is honestly like scary. Like imagine that's the only way that you're seeing yourself represented is in horror movies as someone's like worst nightmare. And I think when you think about it in that light, it becomes even more important to like include like a diversity of like mental illnesses in representation media.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, especially when it comes to like schizophrenia. Like they make it seem like it's so evil, like people are just like, because I know someone who deals with schizophrenia personally, and the way that it's represented in the media and just seeing that firsthand, it is really not like what it is, like the way they portray it. It's just like, the main thing that I know about it is like they can't be around a lot of noise, and they just like, I don't know, I still have to educate myself on it and whatnot. But even then, it's not the way that it's shown in the media. And then like even like with OCD, for example, like they make it seem like, oh, they're just like, really cute, clean people, they're just really tidy. Like no, it's like way more than that. Like it's what do you call it? It's just like it's like a really bad anxiety disorder where you're overthinking like literally everything, and it really like just takes over your life and whatnot. So I just feel like when they do try to add diversity when it comes to mental illnesses, they portray it in the wrong way, and it just gives false information of what the mental illness actually is.
It sucks, especially when you're being portrayed as the villain. You know what I mean? Like you're the bad guy. And then like, you have like your normal people, they're the heroes, and then like this person with the mental illness is just like they're bad, but that's not how it is. And it's weird. Also too, like OCD, I agree with what Cydni said. Like people don't understand like, oh, like each line needs to be perfect. No, like they don't understand. Like everything has to be like this thing has to be perfectly straight. Like people cannot go on with their day unless everything is like perfectly aligned in order. Like it's not a cute thing to be like. I remember back in middle school, a lot of people would be like, "Oh, I have OCD," and we didn't really understand how like bad that was to say without holding like the weight of those words. And then when you get older, it's like you kind of understand just a little bit more, but not all the way, because it's not yours to claim to say I have this when you don't. Like I know another thing too is that ADHD, it's found commonly in females, but a lot of females don't get tested because a lot of them are just seen as, loud and quirky and like
Yeah, definitely. I feel like even now, like I know people who still say like, oh my god, I have OCD. And I think that I'm wondering how the media like it's like the way it bleeds into how people normalize, or not normalize certain things, but how like they talk about it, and they treat it as sort of like just like, I don't know, like a joke or like a quirky thing to say. And I think it's just really like um and and just going back to what you said, Sierra, about like this whole idea of villain versus good person, hero versus villain, that type of like false dichotomy that exists when we talk about like mental illness. And I think we really need to like fall out of these like binaries that kind of hold these stereotypes together and then perpetuate how we talk about mental illness, how we perceive it as like a joke. But then when we see someone who actually has OCD, we don't want to have a conversation with them.
Because there's that one movie, it was about the old like veteran who was blind. Not Hush, but it was like, the name's escaping me. If anyone wants to say it, please say it. But yeah, he was a veteran, and these three like teenagers were coming into the house to steal from him. And throughout the movie, we follow the teenagers, but like we have to kind of realize they're the villains, even though like they're going up against like this opposing force. And then like halfway through to the end of the movie, they found a way to make the guy who's blind, who disabled, who got his house broken into, the bad guy. But they broke into his house, and mind you, he's an elderly man too, and he served the country. So we just had to find a way to make the disabled person somehow the bad guy through all of this, even though they most definitely broke into his house.
Yeah,
but it doesn't really add up, if you ask me.
Yeah, like I completely agree with you, because it was called Don't Breathe. And I remember watching it, and they were making like this disabled man who served in the war, and then he's blind, and he most likely has PTSD because you went to war, and then you're blind, and then you have like 3 kids breaking your house. You gonna fear for your, you're gonna defend yourself, because like you have to take the means necessary to protect yourself. And it made me mad how they were making this man the bad guy. And the whole time while watching the movie, I'm like, but they broke into his house. And I just kept saying like, but you broke into this house. What do you expect him to do? Like, of course he's gonna like take the means necessary to protect himself, even if it means killing you. Like, that's what you get. You broke into his house. And like, also another thing that Sierra said like a while back about like, being in middle school, like, and being like, I have OCD. Oh my gosh. Like, I have depression. I have anxiety. And like, I understand, like, we're young. We don't know the power of our words yet until we get older. And we're like, oh, that was a little bit, extreme. Because even though, like, even I, like, said some stuff like that, like, oh, I have the OCD. But then as I got older, I kind of caught myself and was like, well, that's, like, you shouldn't be taking ownership of something that, like, you don't have. Whereas someone who has to deal with that every day, because believe it or not, like, no one wants to deal with OCD, no one wants to be depressed, like, no one wants to deal with all that. Like, it's not a quirk or anything like that. It's something that you have to learn how to deal with and how to cope with. And people with depression and anxiety and OCD and just any other mental illness, no one wants to deal with that, because it just gets in the way of living. And like, like, I don't have anxiety or anything like that, but I find myself overthinking like all the time, like overthinking every little situation. And sometimes I just wish that I could like just go with the flow with things and just learn to like not be so in control of everything. Like, and some people make it seem like it's a quirk when it's really not. Like, it's frustrating. So
I noticed that a lot of people, everyone here was saying that representation is like, it's the main word. And whether mental health is represented, I noticed personally that it's represented to limited amounts. And like Sierra brought in, it's usually because they want that authenticity. They want that extra character there. So in modern day, besides mental health, sorry, my bad. In modern day, besides like movies and entertainment sources, do you feel that like in your personal lives, within your friend groups, your parents, your family members, do you feel that mental health is stigmatized as something positive to talk about or negative? And then adding on to that, I know therapy is a very important way of dealing with mental health, and a lot of families stereotype that as something negative, something that only people with real issues or like quote bad people need, when that's not the case. So what do you feel in your modern day lives outside of media? How do you feel mental health is stigmatized?
I feel like in like I don't want to say it's taken like too lightly, but too seriously at the same time. But I think, and again, like I feel like parallels with how it is in the media, because I think you either see this romanticization or this like villainization, when in reality mental illness isn't a good quality or a bad quality. It's just something that presents itself in different ways, right? So I think that in my life anyway, I feel like people don't really like they care about it to like a certain extent. You know, they'll like I just see like the same people who post like infographics on their stories like, oh, like how to help your friend with depression or how to do X, Y, and Z. And then it's like they don't really take it to heart, or they don't really implement those actions, you know? And I think that it's like in a classroom environment, people are like, oh yeah, you can talk to me anytime, talk to the teacher, or like, oh, this is an open classroom, whatever, like a space for like mental health awareness, la 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 la. But then nobody is like, I don't know, people aren't really necessarily accepting of everything that goes along with mental illness. And they're not, especially the more like negative things, or the things that are like more leaning towards the negative side, people aren't as willing to accept those or to talk about those. Like I've heard stress be talked about in a classroom. I've heard about procrastination or laziness being talked in the classroom, not wanting to get out of bed. I haven't heard suicide be mentioned in my classroom, suicidal thoughts, irritation, acting out, aggressiveness, none of that in discussions, in classroom discussions among my peers, anyone who's even saying they're like, oh, let's talk about mental health. Those things are never really brought up, I think. So I think it's very kind of one-sided.
Yeah, I agree with you. Like in my personal life, like fortunately I have a family that's like very supportive of me, and they just do the best that they can. But then also there's like I said, there's like this stigma in the Black community, and also kind of like I'm a Christian, so there's like some spiritual stuff in there where like if somebody were like, let's say like someone's like, oh, I'm struggling like with my depression right now, so I'm just kind of having like hard 2 weeks or whatever. They just be like, oh, you just remember, like, pray about it, do what you need to do, just lean on God and you're gonna be all right. And it's like, okay, but like, yes, do what you need to do to like cope with it, but at the same time you got to take like the physical steps as well, whereas like maybe it's reaching out to someone, or like trying to like like do like a favorite activity of yours, or like going to therapy or something like that. And also with the whole therapy thing, I feel like, because there's this one time I was in my class and we were talking about therapy, and like a couple people were just like, oh my gosh, I'll go to therapy, like what's wrong with you? I'm like, there's nothing wrong with going to therapy. Honestly, if you think about it, we all need therapy, mental illness or not, because we just need someone to talk to. Like I think therapy is a very like, it's put in like this negative light when it's really not the case. Like, because I've been in therapy a couple times. I've been in group therapy, which I really love because I love talking to other people who can kind of understand, like, to an extent of what I'm going through. So I feel like therapy isn't like talked about enough. Like, people make it seem like this, oh, only like, insane, crazy people have to go there. Like, no, like, even if you don't deal with anything, like, therapy is a very good thing to go to. I think therapy is very like resourceful, so.
Yeah, I guess I just think that like when my Lolo passed away, a lot of us, like my whole family, we were kind of like in this place, and I was like talking to my dad, and talking to my mom and my sister, and they all were like kind of dealing with this in like a different way. And then for me, I guess it was just like, how do you, like, everybody has a certain like level of things in their lives, and then when something new comes in, then it kind of changes that. So I guess kind of just going back to like being open and being able to talk about like something that happened. I don't know where I'm trying to get at, but just like, how do you talk about uncomfortable things, and how do you kind of be vulnerable with people? And I think that's what I'm trying to get at. How do you like be vulnerable with a group of people and talk about something that you're kind of dealing with in your own way, and you kind of have your own timeline as well? Not everybody is like linear. Sometimes like you'll be fine, and then like like one time I was in a Zoom meeting and I started talking about this and I just like broke down. But like if like a week after he passed away, like I wasn't really like processing it. So yeah, I guess people just go through different things in different ways, and there's like it's not like a steady like that. It's more rickety, and I think that like I'm going back to like in freshman year we did like this health class and we talked about depression and suicide for like a day, and that's it. Like, and then for the rest we talked about like what you should have on your like plate, whether it's like fruits, veggies, and then we like read stuff in a textbook, but we didn't have enough conversations about it. But then we would have like a written like paper. It was like we need to like actually like talk about this and kind of like talk with each other about this and be vulnerable with each other. And I think that's what we're missing when we have discussions about mental health. We need to be open and vulnerable, and we need to be able to like see each other and talk to each other, and also just like reflect back onto ourselves.
And I think once you make these small discussions, especially starting out small, people you know, and then expanding that outwards, that's probably one of the best ways to start being more comfortable if you implement it yourself, if you're doing that. And I think with what Zoe said, her statement, what she talked about, is an amazing way to end this episode on mental health. I would say thank you guys for watching. Thank you to everyone right here, Cydni, Nia, Zoe, Sanvi. Everyone came up and they really kind of shared a part of themselves or what they felt. So I think mental health you can never just deal with, and especially you can't tackle it, especially not in these 30-40 minutes that we have. But this is just a small snippet into kind of, I guess, the world of mental health from different people, from different standpoints. So thank you guys for watching, and you guys can just plug yourself. Cydni, if you want to start.
Alright, so Cydni. I live in the Houston area of Texas. I'm 17 years old. I'm a singer-songwriter. I just released my debut single back in August. It's called Somewhere. Go check it out. It's on all platforms. My artist name is Cydni Brion, but you can find me. I'm mostly on Instagram, which is at Cydbri, where the link to my music is. So you can definitely like find me there, and hopefully my music helps you. So.
Nia, you want to plug yourself next?
Yeah. So I'm Nia. I live in Kingston, Jamaica. And you can follow me on Instagram at Nia Muker. And you should also check out Plantain Republic, which is an artistic activism blog, which features artwork of all kinds by Black, Indigenous women of color. And you should submit your work or just follow along on our Instagram page or our website to see the work that we have.
Zoe 15 Bay Area, and you can follow me at zoe.serrato on Instagram, and you can also follow Bayanihan Youth, which is the youth group of Filipino Advocates for Justice, which is based in the East Bay.
Thank y'all so much, and we hope you have an amazing day, and y'all just made this amazing. So thank y'all. Bye.
Bye, guys.
Hey, guys.
We hope you guys enjoyed this episode.
Don't forget to check us out on Instagram at TeenTalks.teen.
And hey, don't forget to check out all our other episodes streaming now on Spotify and YouTube.